On Monday morning, I arrived at Rick's office with a calm heart, although a part of me already sensed that something was wrong. It had been 9 years of marriage, 9 years in which I had abandoned my career, my ambitions, and my own identity to become the perfect wife of a successful businessman. Rick had asked me to come to his office early, which was unusual because he knew that on Mondays I had my yoga class at 8 a.m. But his message had been curt. "I need you to come to the office. It's urgent. Don't be late." I took the elevator up to the 18th floor, where the executive suites of Mercury Logistics, the company Rick ran with such pride, were located. The glass doors slid open, and Claudia, the receptionist, looked at me with a strange expression, a mixture of pity and nervousness that I couldn't interpret at the moment. "Good morning, Mrs. Montgomery," she said in a hushed voice. "Mr. Montgomery is waiting for you in the boardroom." The boardroom, not his private office. That was already strange. I walked down the hallway lined with Italian marble that Rick had ordered installed the previous year when the company had its best quarter in history. My heels clicked against the floor in the silence of the morning. It was still early, barely 7:30, and most of the employees hadn't arrived yet. But when I opened the heavy double doors of the boardroom, I found it wasn't empty. Rick was standing at the head of the long mahogany table, dressed in one of his bespoke Italian suits, his hair perfectly gelled back, wearing that expression of smugness I knew all too well. Around him, seated in black leather chairs, were his 8 partners. I recognized every one of them. Frank Garrison, the oldest, who had been with Rick since he founded the company. Morris Daniels, the loud guy who always told vulgar jokes at business dinners. Arthur Mendelson, the quiet one, who had always seemed to me the most intelligent of the group. And the other men, all between 40 and 50 years old, all in dark suits and silk ties, looking at me with expressions ranging from curiosity to barely disguised contempt. And standing next to Rick, as if she were his equal, was her. Victoria Owens, the new chief financial officer Rick had hired 6 months ago. She was younger than I was, maybe 26 or 27, with jet black hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders, a burgundy power suit that fit her figure impeccably, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. A smile of triumph. "Valerie," Rick said, his voice firm and practiced, as if he had rehearsed this moment. "Thank you for coming. Please, sit down." I didn't sit. I remained standing by the door, my handbag hanging from my arm, feeling all their eyes boring into me. There was something deeply humiliating about being there, observed by all these men I knew from company parties, Christmas dinners, and charity galas where I smiled and played the role of the devoted wife. "I prefer to stand," I replied, my voice coming out steadier than I expected. Rick sighed, as if my response were a minor inconvenience. "Suit yourself. This won't take long." He paused, and I saw him exchange a glance with Victoria. She nodded slightly, as if giving him permission or encouragement. "Valerie, I've made an important decision. I'm divorcing you. I've already spoken with my lawyers, and the papers are ready. I need you to sign now." The silence that followed his words was absolute. I could hear the hum of the central air conditioning, the ticking of the wall clock, my own breathing. I stood there looking at him, trying to process what he had just said. It wasn't that I hadn't expected it. During the last few months, Rick had been increasingly distant. He came home late. His excuses were becoming more elaborate and less credible. But this public humiliation, this grotesque theater in front of his partners, I hadn't expected this. "You're asking me for a divorce here? Now? In front of them?" I asked, gesturing toward the men surrounding us. "I thought it would be more efficient," Rick replied with a coldness that cut through me like a knife. "You know how you are, Valerie. Always so dramatic, so emotional. I thought if there were witnesses, you'd maintain your composure, and this would be quicker." Morris Daniels let out a stifled chuckle. Frank Garrison looked away, uncomfortable. The others simply watched as if this were a show for their morning entertainment. "And her?" I asked, looking at Victoria. "What role does she play in all this?" Victoria took a step forward, her smile widening. "I am the reason Rick finally found the courage to do what he should have done years ago," she said in a sweet voice that held an edge of steel. "I'm much more competent than you, Valerie, in every sense." The men laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but something subtler, crueler. A laugh of complicity among men sharing a private joke at the expense of the humiliated wife. I felt the heat rise up my neck, felt my cheeks burn, but not from shame. It was rage, a cold, crystalline rage that filled me completely. Rick slid a folder toward me across the table. "The papers are here. They're already signed on my end. I just need your signature. I've been generous, Valerie. I'm leaving you the brownstone in Brooklyn Heights. Although the truth is you never liked it as much as I did. I'm giving you a monthly alimony stipend for the next 2 years. After that, I expect you'll be able to support yourself." "How generous," I murmured, approaching the table. I took the folder and opened it. The documents were there, perfectly drafted. Every clause was designed to protect Rick's interests. The Brooklyn house, which was worth a fraction of what he had earned during our marriage. The monthly compensation that would barely cover my basic expenses in the city. Nothing from the company, nothing from the investments, nothing of what really mattered. "I've been a good wife," I said quietly, turning the pages. "I left my job at the bank to support you when you decided to found this company. I organized all your business dinners, charmed your clients, did everything you asked of me. And I appreciate it," Rick said, almost sounding sincere. "But I don't need you anymore, Valerie. I need someone who truly understands what I do. Someone who can contribute to the company significantly. Victoria has an MBA from Harvard, speaks 4 languages, and has increased our financial efficiency by 30% in just 6 months. What have you done lately? Go to the spa? Take yoga classes? More laughter." Arthur Mendelsohn didn't even bother to hide his smile. Frank Garrison was still looking away, but he no longer seemed uncomfortable. He looked bored, as if this were just another item on his daily agenda. I reached into my bag and pulled out a pen. It was a Mont Blanc that Rick had given me for our 5th anniversary, with my initials engraved in gold. "Because you're my partner in life," he had told me then, kissing me on the forehead. How ironic that I would now use that very gift to sign the end of our marriage. "Are you going to sign without a fight?" Victoria asked, and there was a tone of disappointment in her voice, as if she had expected more resistance from me. I looked at the documents one last time. I saw my name written there. Valerie Sterling Montgomery. Soon, I would just be Valerie Sterling again. I took the pen and held it over the dotted line. My hand didn't tremble even once. 9 years, I said softly. 9 years of my life dedicated to you, Rick, to your dream, to your company, to your success. And I thank you, he repeated impatiently. But it's time to move on, for both of us. I signed. My name flowed onto the page with the elegance of years of practice in calligraphy. Valerie Sterling. I closed the folder and pushed it toward Rick. "Thank you for these 9 years, I murmured. I didn't say it with sarcasm. I said it with an absolute calm, a serenity that surprised even me. I turned to leave. I had taken 2 steps toward the door when Rick spoke again. "Valerie, wait. I need you to leave the office keys and the access card for the club." I stopped. Of course. It wasn't enough to humiliate me and divorce me. He also had to strip me of the small symbols of status I had held as his wife. I reached into my bag and pulled out the keychain with the office keys and the sleek black card for the exclusive athletic club that only company partners and their families could access. I let them fall onto the table with a metallic clatter. "Anything else?" I asked, looking him in the eye. Rick smirked. It was a victorious smile, the smile of a man who believed he had won. "No, that's all. You can go." I walked out of the boardroom with my head held high. I walked down the marble hallway, past Claudia, who was still watching me with that expression of pity, and waited for the elevator. The doors opened, and I stepped in. But just before they closed, someone stuck a hand out to stop them. It was an older man, perhaps in his mid-60s, with a full head of completely white hair styled in a classic cut. He wore an impeccable gray suit and carried a leather briefcase in one hand. His eyes, a dark brown, almost black, observed me with an intensity that made me feel uneasy. "Excuse me," he said in a deep, cultivated voice. He stepped into the elevator and stood next to me. He pressed the button for the 15th floor. We stood in silence as the elevator descended. I watched the digital numbers change, trying to maintain my composure, trying not to think about what had just happened, but I felt his eyes on me. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore and looked at him. "Is something wrong?" I asked, perhaps more brusquely than necessary. He smiled, But it wasn't a mocking smile like Victoria's or condescending like Rick's. It was a sad, understanding smile. "Forgive the indiscretion, madam, but I just witnessed something in the boardroom that seemed deeply inappropriate to me." Ah. So he had witnessed my humiliation. He had probably been waiting outside for a meeting with Rick and the partners. I felt my face flush again. "Don't worry about it," I said, looking back at the numbers. "It's a personal matter." "Undoubtedly," he replied. "But when personal matters are handled so unprofessionally in a corporate environment, they cease to be merely personal." The elevator stopped at the 15th floor. The doors opened, but he didn't move. He looked at me one more time, and this time I saw something in his eyes I couldn't quite identify. Concern? Curiosity? Something else. "My name is Emmett Sterling," he said, extending his hand. "Chairman of the Board of Mercury Logistics." I felt my entire body go rigid. The chairman of the board, the man who was technically Rick's boss, even though Rick always acted as if he answered to no one. I shook his hand briefly. "Valerie," I replied. "I didn't add my married name. It no longer belonged to me." "I know," said Emmett Sterling, and something in the way he said it made me think he knew much more than he let on. "A pleasure to meet you formally, niece." And then he walked out of the elevator, leaving me alone with those words echoing in my head. Niece. The doors closed, and the elevator continued to descend, but I remained frozen, trying to process what I had just heard. Emmett Sterling. Sterling, my maiden name. But I didn't have uncles. My parents had died in a car accident when I was 23, right after I graduated from college. I had been an only child. I had no extended family, or at least, that was what I had always believed. The elevator reached the lobby, and the doors opened. I walked out in a trance. I walked toward the building exit, passing the security guards who greeted me politely, as they always had. I stepped out onto the street, and the morning sun hit me with its bright light. New York City was waking up. Traffic was starting to congest. People were rushing toward their jobs. I stood on the sidewalk, not knowing what to do, not knowing where to go. For the first time in 9 years, I was completely alone. No husband, no home because the house where I had lived with Rick never truly felt like mine. No purpose, because my entire life had revolved around being the wife of Roderick Montgomery. I took my phone out of my bag. I had several messages from my best friend, Sophie, asking how the meeting with Rick had gone. She was the only person I had told about my suspicions of infidelity, the only one who had warned me that something bad was about to happen. I didn't reply. Not yet. First, I needed to process this myself. I opened the web browser on my phone and searched Emmett Sterling, Chairman Mercury Logistics. The results appeared instantly. There were dozens of articles about him. Successful businessman, investor, philanthropist. There were photos of him at charity events, award ceremonies, shareholder meetings, and then I saw something that made me stop. A photograph from 20 years ago, from an article about the founding of a telecommunications company. In the photo were 3 people. A young man who was clearly Emmett Sterling, with much darker hair, an elegant, middle-aged woman, and a man who looked strangely familiar. I read the caption, Emmett Sterling with his sister Patricia and brother-in-law Robert at the inauguration of Telcom Systems. Patricia Sterling. My mother's name was Patricia Sterling, before she married my father. And the man in the photo, now that I looked closer, had the same eyes I saw in the framed photographs I kept at home, my father, Robert. The phone almost slipped from my hands. Emmett Sterling was my uncle, my mother's brother. How was it possible that I had never known of his existence? Why had my parents never spoken of him? And more importantly, what was he doing as chairman of the board of Rick's company? I kept reading the articles, increasingly confused. Emmett Sterling was a major investor in various tech and logistics companies. He had founded his own fortune after selling Telcom Systems for an astronomical sum. And according to an article from 9 years ago, right when Rick was founding Mercury Logistics, Emmett Sterling had been one of the lead investors. 9 years. The same amount of time I had been married to Rick. Was it a coincidence? I called an Uber and got in when it arrived. I gave the driver the address of the house in Brooklyn Heights, the one that was now officially mine according to the divorce papers. During the ride, I kept searching for information on my phone. I found more articles, more photos, more details about Emmett Sterling's life. And then I found something that left me breathless. An article from 12 years ago about a family dispute. Apparently, Emmett Sterling had become estranged from his sister Patricia after she married my father against the family's wishes. The Sterlings were a traditional, conservative, old money family, and my father had been a middle-class university professor, not the kind of man they considered suitable for Patricia. So, they had disinherited her. Emmett had tried to maintain contact, but Patricia had rejected his help, proud and independent to the end. When I arrived at the Brooklyn Heights brownstone, my hands were shaking so much I could barely fit the key in the lock. It was a beautiful home, classic pre-war style, with high ceilings and a small garden in the back. Rick had bought it as an investment 5 years ago, but he had never really liked it. He preferred the modern penthouse on Park Avenue where we spent most of our time. This house had been more of a whim of mine, a place where I could escape when I needed silence. I entered, and the familiar smell of jasmine air freshener greeted me. Everything was exactly as I had left it the week before. The furniture I had chosen myself, the white linen curtains, the potted plants. I left my bag on the living room sofa and went straight to the room I had converted into my personal study. That was where I kept all the important things from my life before Rick, the things he had never bothered to look at because they didn't interest him. I opened the closet and pulled out a cedarwood box that had belonged to my mother. Inside were all the family photos, important documents, letters. I sat on the floor and began sifting through everything with an urgency I hadn't felt in years. There had to be something, some clue explaining why Emmett Sterling had disappeared from my life before I even knew he existed. I found photos of my parents when they were young. My mother, Patricia, was beautiful, with the same dark hair I had inherited and a radiant smile. My father, Robert, looked at her in every photo as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. There were photos of their wedding, simple but elegant, in a garden. Photos of me as a baby. Birthday photos. Beach vacations in Cape Cod. Christmases. But in none of them did Emmett Sterling appear, nor any other member of my mother's family. Then, I found a letter. It was in a yellowed envelope, with no address, just my mother's name written in elegant, firm handwriting. The date was 26 years ago, a year before I was born. I took it out carefully and began to read. Patricia, I know you want nothing to do with me or the family, and I respect your decision. But I need you to know that the door will always be open for you. Mother and father are stubborn, proud, and wrong to reject Robert. I do not defend them. But we are family, and that means something. I have created a trust in your name. You don't have to accept it now, but it is there. If you ever need it, you only have to ask. Your brother who loves you, Emmett. I read the letter 3 times. A trust fund. Emmett had created a trust for my mother over 25 years ago. What had happened to that money? Why had my mother never mentioned it? I kept searching through the papers and found more letters, all in the same style. Emmett insisting on maintaining contact, my mother politely but firmly rejecting him. And then I found something different. A legal document dated 12 years ago, shortly after my parents died. It was a letter from a law firm informing me that I was the beneficiary of a trust established by Emmett Sterling. The amount wasn't specified in the letter, but there were instructions to contact the firm if I desired additional information. I stared at the document, trying to remember. 12 years ago, I was 23. I had just graduated. I had just lost my parents in that horrible accident. I was devastated, lost, not knowing what to do with my life. In the midst of all that chaos, I had received mountains of legal papers related to my parents' estate, insurance, all the bureaucratic paperwork that comes with death. This letter from the law firm had gotten lost in all of that. I had probably filed it away without paying attention, too overwhelmed to process one more thing. I looked up the name of the law firm on my phone. Fields and Associates. It still existed. Offices in the Flatiron District. I looked at my watch. It was barely 9 a.m. I still had time. I changed clothes quickly, putting on black trousers and a white blouse, something professional but not flashy. I tied my hair in a high ponytail and applied light makeup to hide the marks of exhaustion and tension. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a different woman than the one who had entered that boardroom a few hours ago. There was something in my eyes, a determination that hadn't been there before. The law firm was in a historic building, well-maintained, with original mosaic floors and wooden stairs that creaked under my feet. The receptionist, A middle-aged woman with thick-rimmed glasses greeted me with a professional smile. "Good morning. I have an inquiry about a trust established several years ago," I said, showing her the letter. She reviewed the document, and her expression changed slightly. "One moment, please. I'm going to call Mr. Fields. He handles these matters." I sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting room and waited. 10 minutes later, a man in his 50s emerged, wearing a navy blue suit and red tie, with a serious but kind expression. "Mrs. Sterling?" he asked. "Miss," I corrected automatically. "Valerie Sterling." "Of course. Forgive me. I am Albert Fields. Can we speak in my office?" I followed him down a corridor to a spacious office with windows overlooking the street. There were shelves full of legal books, a dark mahogany desk, and walls decorated with degrees and certificates. He gestured for me to sit in one of the chairs facing the desk. "Miss Sterling, we have been waiting to hear from you for a very long time," he said, pulling a thick folder from one of his desk drawers. "Mr. Emmett Sterling established this trust 26 years ago, originally in his sister Patricia's name. After her passing, you became the automatic beneficiary. We sent that letter 12 years ago, but we never received a response. It was a very difficult time in my life," I explained. "I didn't pay attention to a lot of things." "I understand perfectly," Mr. Fields nodded. "But I am glad you are here now. Mr. Sterling has kept the trust active all these years, waiting for the moment you decided to exercise your rights." "My rights?" I asked, confused. Mr. Fields opened the folder and took out several documents. "Miss Sterling, this trust isn't just cash. It is a highly diversified investment portfolio, including stocks in various companies. Mr. Fields is a dated under one. Sterling has been very strategic with these investments over the years." He handed me a sheet with a list of companies. I recognized some tech companies, real estate, manufacturing, and then I saw a name that made me stop cold. "Mercury Logistics." "I have shares in Mercury Logistics?" I asked, pointing to the name. "That is correct. In fact, it is the largest investment in the trust. You own 61% of the shares of Mercury Logistics." I felt as if the world tilted beneath my feet. 61%. Correct. Mr. Sterling acquired these shares when the company was founded 9 years ago. At that time, he bought 30% as a lead investor. But over the years, he has been buying more shares from other partners who wanted to sell, always through the trust in your name. Currently, you are the majority shareholder of Mercury Logistics. I couldn't breathe. My husband, my ex-husband, the man who had just humiliated me in front of his partners, who had thrown me out of his office as if I were a nuisance. He didn't know that I was the owner of his company. Technically, he worked for me. "Does Roderick Montgomery know this?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "No. Mr. Sterling has kept these investments anonymous through a series of intermediary holding companies. In public records, the shares appear in the name of an investment firm registered in the Cayman Islands, which in turn is owned by a company in Panama, which is finally controlled by the trust in your name. It is completely legal, but very difficult to trace without access to the full documentation." "Why?" I asked. "Why would my uncle do that?" Mr. Fields smiled slightly. "You would have to ask him that yourself. But if I may speculate, based on the years I have worked with Mr. Sterling, I would say he wanted to protect you. And he also wanted to ensure that when you finally knew the truth, you had options." "Options." "Power. Miss Sterling, as majority shareholder, you have total control over the company. You can appoint and remove the CEO. You can approve or reject any major decision. You can sell the company if you wish, or you can keep it and run it yourself." I leaned back in the chair, trying to process all this information. For 9 years, I had been the invisible wife, the decoration at company parties, the woman Rick introduced with a smile before ignoring her the rest of the night. And all that time, I had been the true owner. "What do I have to do to exercise these rights?" I asked. "Sign some documents declaring your identity and your intention to take active control of the trust. And then we would have to formally notify the board of directors of Mercury Logistics. There is a whole legal process, but we can handle it all from this firm. If you start today, we could have everything ready in 24 hours. "Do it," I said without hesitation. "I want all the papers ready for tomorrow." Mr. Fields nodded and began pulling out forms. We spent the next 2 hours reviewing documents, signing papers, establishing the next steps. He explained that we would have to call an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors, that we would have to present all the documentation proving my ownership of the shares, that there would be questions and likely resistance. "Mr. Montgomery is not going to be happy," warned Mr. Fields. "No," I agreed. "He won't be." When I left the law firm, it was almost 2 p.m. I was hungry, but I couldn't think about eating. I called Sophie. "Where have you been?" was the first thing she said when she picked up. "I've called you 1,000 times. What happened with Rick? I need to see you. Can you come to the Brooklyn house?" "I'm on my way." Sophie arrived 40 minutes later with 2 orders of artisanal tacos and a bottle of Pinot Grigio. She was my best friend from college, a practical and direct woman who had never understood what I saw in Rick. We sat in the kitchen, and while we ate, I told her everything. The divorce, the humiliation, Victoria, and then I told her about Emmett Sterling, the trust fund, the shares. She fell silent for a long moment, processing all the information. Then she burst out laughing, a deep, genuine laugh that made her double over the table. "I can't believe it," she said finally, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. "Rick doesn't know you own his company. He has no idea. This is poetic justice at its finest." She took a sip of wine and looked at me seriously. "What are you going to do?" "Tomorrow I'm going to appear at an extraordinary meeting of the board of directors. I'm going to present the documentation proving I'm the majority shareholder, and then I'm going to fire Rick as CEO. Sophie whistled softly. "It's going to be a huge scandal. You know how the business world is. They'll say you're a vengeful harpy, that you're using family connections, that you don't have the necessary skills. Let them say whatever they want. I have the legal rights, and I have more than enough reasons to want Rick out of that company. And then what? Are you going to run the company?" That was the question I had been avoiding. The truth was, I had no idea how to run a logistics company. I had studied economics at Columbia. I had worked for 2 years at a bank before marrying Rick. But that had been almost a decade ago. The business world had changed. I had changed. "I don't know," I admitted, "but I'm going to find out." That night, I barely slept. I tossed and turned in bed, thinking about everything that had happened, everything that was to come. I thought about Rick, his face of satisfaction when he had asked me to sign the divorce papers. I thought about Victoria with her superior smile. I thought about all those partners laughing at my expense. At 6 a.m., I gave up and got out of bed. I took a long, hot shower, choosing every step of my routine carefully. I put on a black Armani pantsuit I had bought for a gala 2 years ago but never worn because Rick said it made me look too severe. I did my makeup with more care than usual, professional but elegant. I put on the pearl earrings that had belonged to my mother and the Cartier watch my father had given me when I graduated college. When I looked in the mirror, I saw a woman I didn't fully recognize. It was me, but a stronger, more determined version. A woman who knew her worth and wasn't going to let anyone treat her as less than that. Mr. Fields called me at 8 a.m. "Everything is ready. The meeting is scheduled for 10 a.m. I have sent formal notifications to all members of the board of directors. Some have already confirmed their attendance. Does Rick know it was me who called the meeting?" "No. The summons comes from me as legal representative of the majority shareholder. Your name doesn't appear anywhere yet. It will be a surprise." "Perfect." I arrived at the Mercury Logistics building at 9:45 a.m. This time, I didn't enter through the main entrance. Mr. Fields was waiting for me in the parking garage, and we went up together via the service elevator, straight to the 18th floor. We arrived at a different conference room than the boardroom where Rick had humiliated me the day before. This one was larger, more formal, with a huge glass table and Italian leather chairs. Emmett Sterling was already there, seated at the head of the table. Upon seeing me, he stood up and smiled. It was a sad but proud smile. "Valerie," he said, approaching me, "I'm glad you decided to take this path." "Did you plan it all?" I asked. "Not exactly," he replied. "From the beginning, when your mother died, I tried to get close to you, but I thought you needed time. And then you met Rick, and you seemed happy. He was ambitious, intelligent, had a good business plan. I decided to invest in his company, but I did it through the trust. I wanted you to have financial security, even if you didn't know it. I thought someday I would tell you, when the moment was right. And when you found out what Rick did to me yesterday, I was on the floor waiting for a meeting with him. I heard shouting, laughter. I peeked into the boardroom and saw what was happening. It was repugnant. A man who treats his wife like that deserves to lead nothing. Before I could respond, the door opened, and the other members of the board began to arrive. I recognized some of Rick's partners, Frank, Morris, Arthur. There were also other men and women I didn't know, likely external investors. Everyone looked at me with curiosity, but no one said anything. At 10 a.m. sharp, Rick arrived. He walked in with Victoria by his side, both dressed impeccably with the confidence of those who believe they control the situation. When he saw me, he stopped dead in his tracks. "What are you doing here?" he asked, looking at me with contempt. "I'm here because I have the right," I replied calmly. "Take a seat, Rick. This is going to be interesting." Rick remained standing by the door, staring at me as if I were a ghost. Victoria, beside him, had an expression of confusion mixed with irritation. Emmett Sterling gestured toward the empty chairs. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Owens, please take a seat. We have important matters to discuss." Rick finally moved, but not without shooting me a warning glare. He sat in his usual spot, near the head of the table, with Victoria next to him. I remained standing next to Mr. Fields, who had placed his briefcase on the table and was taking out a series of documents. "Good morning, everyone," began Mr. Fields with a firm, professional voice. "Thank you for attending this extraordinary meeting of the Board of Directors of Mercury Logistics. I have convened this session on behalf of the majority shareholder of this company, who has decided to exercise her rights actively as of today." Morris Daniels let out a mocking laugh. "Majority shareholder? We all know the control of this company is divided among us partners. There is no single majority shareholder." "That is what everyone believed," replied Mr. Fields, opening the first folder. "But the reality is different. During the last 9 years, there has been a series of stock transactions that have gone unnoticed by most of you. When some partners decided to sell their stakes, these were acquired by an investment firm acting on behalf of a trust. That trust has a beneficiary, Miss Valerie Sterling." The silence that followed was absolute. All eyes turned to me. I saw Rick go pale, saw his hands grip the arms of his chair. "That's absurd," he said finally, his voice trembling. "Valerie has no money of her own. She never has. During our marriage, everything she had came from me." "Incorrect," Emmett Sterling intervened. "Valerie is the heiress to a trust I established 26 years ago for my sister Patricia. When Patricia passed away, Valerie automatically became the beneficiary, and I, as the trustee, have made strategic investments in her name all these years." Frank Garrison cleared his throat. "Are you saying Emmett Sterling and Valerie are family?" "I am her uncle," Emmett confirmed. Although we had been estranged for many years due to complicated family circumstances, Arthur Mendelson, the quietest of the partners, spoke for the first time. "If this is true, we need to see the documentation. We can't simply accept this story without proof." "Of course," said Mr. Fields, beginning to distribute copies of the documents. "Here you have the deed of trust, the records of all stock transactions, the stock certificates, and the complete chain of ownership from the intermediary companies to the trust. Everything is perfectly documented and completely legal." While the attendees reviewed the documents, I watched Rick. He had gone from pale to a deep red. His eyes darted from the papers to me over and over again, as if he couldn't believe what he was seeing. Victoria had leaned in to read over his shoulder, and her expression of superiority had vanished completely. "This can't be real," Rick muttered. "It has to be a mistake." "There is no mistake," said a female voice from the other side of the table. It was a woman in her 40s, elegant, wearing designer glasses, who hadn't said anything until that moment. "I am Gabriela Ruiz, the company's independent auditor. I reviewed these documents this morning at Mr. Fields' request, and I can confirm they are authentic. Miss Sterling effectively owns 61% of the shares of Mercury Logistics." Rick stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward. "This is a conspiracy, a trap! Valerie, how could you do this to me?" I stood up too, looking him straight in the eye. "How could I do this to you, Rick? Until yesterday morning, I had no idea these shares existed. I didn't know my uncle had been investing in your company. I knew nothing of this. But you. Yesterday, you humiliated me in front of your partners. You kicked me out of your office like I was trash, and put your mistress next to me to mock me. So don't tell me I did something to you." "I built this company," Rick shouted, slamming his fist on the table. "I worked day and night for 9 years to build it. You did nothing." "Except be the owner," I said calmly. "And as owner, I have certain rights. Mr. Fields has explained to me what they are." Emmett Sterling intervened before Rick could respond. "Mr. Montgomery, I suggest you take a seat. This is going to be resolved in a civilized and professional manner, or I will have to ask you to leave the meeting." Rick stood there a moment longer, breathing heavily, clearly trying to control his rage. Finally, he sat down, but he didn't stop looking at me with hatred. Mr. Fields continued. "Now that we have established ownership of the shares, let us proceed with the agenda. Ms. Sterling, as majority shareholder, has the right to propose and vote on changes to the company's management structure. Ms. Sterling, do you wish to make a motion?" I took a deep breath. This was the moment. Yes, I propose the immediate removal of Roderick Montgomery as CEO of Mercury Logistics. The murmur that ran through the room was instantaneous. Several partners began speaking at the same time. Rick stood up again, but Emmett Sterling raised his hand. "Order, please. There is a motion on the table. Does anyone wish to second it?" To my surprise, Arthur Mendelsohn raised his hand. "I second it." Everyone looked at him in astonishment, Rick included. "I've been at this company since the beginning, and I've seen many things I didn't like. Mr. Montgomery has made questionable decisions in recent years. He has spent the budget irresponsibly on personal projects and created a toxic work environment. If Miss Sterling has the power to make a change, I think we should listen to her." Rick looked at him as if he had betrayed him. "Arthur, you too?" "It's not personal, Rick," Arthur replied. "It's business, and frankly, after what we all saw yesterday in the boardroom, I think you've lost perspective on what it means to be a professional leader." Frank Garrison nodded slowly. "Arthur is right. Yesterday was embarrassing." "Ex-wife," Victoria corrected with a sharp voice. "They signed the divorce papers yesterday. They are nothing now." "Even so," said a gray-haired woman on the other side of the table, "it was inappropriate. I am Eleanor Castor, representative of the minority investors. I didn't know Miss Sterling personally, but I have heard rumors about Mr. Montgomery's behavior in the office. If these rumors are true, then perhaps a change of leadership is what this company needs." Rick looked around the table seeking support, but most of those present avoided his gaze. Only Morris, Daniels, and a couple of other partners seemed to be on his side. Victoria had red cheeks from rage and embarrassment. "Very well," said Mr. Fields. "There is a motion, and it has been seconded. Let us proceed to the vote. All those in favor of removing Roderick Montgomery as CEO, please raise your hand." I raised my hand immediately. Emmett Sterling raised his. Arthur did too. Frank hesitated a moment, but then raised his hand. Eleanor Castor raised hers too. And one by one, other board members did the same. In the end, only Morris and 2 other partners kept their hands on the table. "The motion is approved by majority," announced Mr. Fields. "Roderick Montgomery is removed from his position as CEO, effective immediately." Rick stood up so violently his chair fell over. "This is a coup. You can't do this to me. I built this company from scratch. With investor money," Emmett Sterling reminded him. "Money that largely came from Valerie's trust. Without that initial investment, Mercury Logistics would never have existed. So technically, Rick, your company exists thanks to her." The words fell on Rick like buckets of ice water. He stood there, breathing heavily, looking at me with a mixture of hate and something that might have been twisted admiration. "Are you enjoying this?" he asked me in a low voice, charged with venom. "Do you feel powerful now?" "No," I replied honestly. "I don't enjoy this, Rick, but it was necessary. Yesterday you treated me as if I were worth nothing, as if 9 years of my life dedicated to you and your dream meant nothing. Well, it turns out they did mean something. They meant that all that time, I was the one who had the real power, and neither of us knew it." Victoria stood up too. "This is ridiculous. Rick is a business genius. This company will collapse without him." "I doubt it," Arthur said. "Rick is good at sales and PR. But the truth is, Victoria, you have been the one keeping the finances in order these last few months, and I have been the one handling daily operations. Rick is more of a figurehead than anything else at this point." "That's not true," Rick exclaimed, but his voice sounded less convinced. Mr. Fields intervened. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Owens, I am going to ask you to leave this room." This meeting is for members of the board of directors, and you are no longer part of it. Security will accompany you to your office so you can collect your personal belongings." "Security?" Rick laughed bitterly. "You're going to drag me out of my own company with security?" "It's not your company," I said, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected. "It never was. And yes, security will escort you, just like you said would happen to me if I didn't sign the papers yesterday." I saw comprehension dawn in Rick's eyes. He had threatened to do exactly that. If I resisted the divorce, he had said they would remove me from the building with security if I caused trouble. And now, less than 24 hours later, he was the one being escorted out. The door opened, and 2 security guards entered. They were big men, professional, with neutral expressions. One of them spoke in a respectful but firm voice. "Mr. Montgomery, Miss Owens, if you could come with us, please." Rick looked at me one last time. "This doesn't end here, Valerie. I'm going to fight this. I'm going to take you to court. I'm going to destroy your reputation. I'm going to make sure everyone knows you're a manipulator who used family connections to steal what I built." "Do what you have to do," I replied calmly. "But the facts are clear. I am the owner. You were the employee. And now you are a former employee." Victoria glared at me as they left. "This is out of spite," she said, "because Rick traded you for someone better." "No," I corrected her. "This is for justice. And if you are as competent as you say, I'm sure you'll find another job quickly." The guards escorted them out of the room. When the door closed behind them, the silence was deafening. Everyone looked at me, waiting to see what I would do now. I was wondering the same thing. Emmett Sterling cleared his throat. "Now we need to appoint an interim CEO while we determine the path forward. Does anyone have proposals?" "I propose Arthur Mendelsohn," Frank said immediately. "He knows operations better than anyone and has shown the integrity necessary for the position." Several others nodded in agreement. Arthur looked surprised but pleased. "I accept," he said, "but only on an interim basis. This company needs a permanent leader with a long-term vision." "I agree," I said, "and I think we all need time to assess the situation and determine the best path forward." I looked at Emmett. "Including me, I need to learn about this company, about how it works, about the challenges it faces." Emmett smiled with approval. "That is a wise attitude, Valerie. You don't have to make all the decisions today. For now, the important thing is to stabilize the situation." The meeting continued for another hour. We discussed transition procedures, current projects needing immediate attention, and how we would handle the public announcement of the leadership change. Arthur turned out to be incredibly organized and detailed, confirming my impression that he was the right person for the interim role. When the meeting finally ended, Emmett asked me to stay a moment. When everyone else had left, we were alone in the conference room. "How do you feel?" he asked me. I sat in one of the chairs, suddenly exhausted. Overwhelmed, scared, satisfied, all at the same time. He sat next to me. "I understand. You have done something very brave today. Why did you never look for me?" I asked him. "After my parents died? Why did you let 12 years pass without even introducing yourself?" Emmett sighed deeply. "Your mother asked me to stay away. In her will, she left specific instructions. She wanted you to live your life without the influence of the Sterling family, without the pressure of our money and our expectations. But she also left a clause saying that if you ever needed me, if your life was ever in danger or in a difficult situation, I should intervene. When I saw you yesterday in that elevator, with the look on your face, I knew the time had come. But why invest in Rick's company? Why put the shares in my name? Because I wanted you to have options, Valerie. I wanted that if one day you woke up and realized you deserved more, you would have the means to claim your power. I didn't know that day would come so soon or in this way, but I knew it would eventually come. I felt tears burning behind my eyes. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't even believe in myself." Emmett took my hand. "You are your mother's daughter. Patricia was the strongest woman I knew. She was stubborn and proud and sometimes frustrating, but she never gave up. I see a lot of her in you. Will you tell me about her? About the family? There are so many things I don't know." "Of course. But not today. Today you need to go home, rest, process all this. Tomorrow we can talk. I'll tell you everything you want to know." I nodded, too tired to argue. We left the building together. In the lobby, I saw Rick and Victoria by the security area with cardboard boxes full of their personal belongings. Rick saw me and looked away immediately. Victoria glared daggers at me but said nothing. When I stepped out onto the street, the sun was shining brightly. It was barely noon, but it felt as if a whole day had passed. My phone started ringing immediately. It was Sophie. "Well?" she asked as soon as I answered. "Did you do it?" "I did it," I replied. "Rick is no longer the CEO." Sophie screamed with excitement on the other end of the line. "I knew it! I knew you would do it! How did it feel?" "Honestly? I don't know yet. I think I'm still in shock. Come to my place. I'm going to open a bottle of wine, and we are going to celebrate properly." I smiled for the first time in what felt like centuries. I'm on my way. I spent that afternoon at Sophie's apartment, drinking white wine and eating cheese while I told her every detail of what had happened at the board meeting. She listened with eyes as wide as saucers, interrupting occasionally with exclamations of astonishment or satisfaction. "I can't believe Arthur Mendelsohn was the first to second the motion," she said, pouring herself more wine. "He always seemed so quiet and reserved to me. I thought he'd be the most loyal to Rick." "Me too," I admitted, "but apparently he's been seeing things he didn't like, and I think what happened yesterday in the boardroom was the straw that broke the camel's back for many of them." "Because it was cruel and unnecessary," Sophie added. "Look, I was never a fan of Rick, you know that. But yesterday was another level. Humiliating you in front of all his partners, having his mistress there smiling, that's not just ending a marriage. That's sadism." She was right. All the previous night and that morning, I had been so focused on the logistics of everything, the legal documents, the strategy, that I hadn't allowed myself to really feel the betrayal. But now, sitting on Sophie's comfortable sofa, with the wine relaxing my defenses, I finally began to process it emotionally. "I was with him 9 years, I said softly. 9 years thinking we were building a life together. Do you know what it's like to realize that all that time he only saw me as an accessory? As something useful until I ceased to be?" Sophie took my hand. "I know, and it's horrible. But also look at what you discovered. Look at the power you had all this time without knowing it. Your uncle was protecting you, preparing the way so that when you reached this moment, you had options. But why did he never tell me? Why wait until now? Maybe because he knew that if he told you before, you would have doubted yourself. You would have thought you were only valuable because of that money, because of those shares. By not knowing, by living these years as you did, you proved you are strong regardless of your financial situation." I had never thought about it that way. "Maybe you're right." "Of course I'm right," Sophie smiled. "Now the question is, what are you going to do? Are you going to run the company yourself?" "I don't know. I have no experience in logistics. I don't even know exactly what Mercury Logistics does day to day." "Then learn. You have time now. You have resources, and you have Arthur as interim director. Use him. Learn from him. And if after a few months you decide it's not your thing, you can hire someone else or sell the company." "Sell it? Why not? It's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. You could sell it, take the money, and go live on a beach in Tulum for the rest of your life if you wanted." The idea was tempting, but there was something in me that resisted. "I feel I owe something to my uncle. He invested all that money. He took care of those shares for years. I can't simply sell it all and disappear." "You don't owe anyone anything, Valerie," Sophie said firmly. "Your uncle did what he did because he wanted to protect you, because he loves you, not because he expected something in return. Any decision you make has to be yours, not out of obligation." We sat in silence a moment, drinking wine and looking out the window of Sophie's apartment, which had a beautiful view of Central Park. The sun was beginning to set, dyeing the sky oranges and pinks. "I think I want to try," I said finally. "I want to learn about the company. I want to see if I can do this. And if I can't, at least I will have tried." Sophie smiled. "That's my girl." I stayed at Sophie's that night. She insisted I shouldn't be alone, and honestly, I didn't want to be either. We slept in her king-size bed watching bad movies and eating popcorn until I finally fell asleep around midnight. The next day, I woke up to a message from Arthur Mendelsohn. "Good morning, Valerie. If you have time today, I would like to meet with you to discuss some urgent company matters. Could you come to the office around 11? I replied that I would be there. Sophie lent me some clothes because I hadn't brought anything, and by 10:30 I was on my way to the Mercury Logistics building. This time I entered through the front door with my head held high, feeling strangely nervous. Claudia, the receptionist, greeted me with a different smile than the one she had given me 2 days ago. It wasn't a smile of pity anymore, it was genuine respect. "Good morning, Miss Sterling. Mr. Mendelsohn is waiting for you in the CEO's office." "Thank you, Claudia." I went up to the 18th floor and walked down the hallway I knew so well, but this time, when I passed, the employees looked at me with curiosity and respect. Some greeted me with a respectful good morning. Others simply nodded, but everyone knew. Somehow, in less than 24 hours, the whole building had found out what had happened. The office that had been Rick's was enormous. It had floor-to-ceiling windows with a panoramic view of the city, a designer desk, shelves full of awards, and a lounge area with leather sofas. Arthur was sitting at the desk, surrounded by papers and folders, with his laptop open in front of him. "Valerie, thank you for coming," he said, standing up. "Please, sit down." I sat in one of the chairs facing the desk. Arthur looked tired, as if he hadn't slept much, but there was also an energy about him I hadn't seen before, as if he were finally in his element. "First of all," he began, "I want to thank you for yesterday. I know it was difficult for you, and I admire your courage. Thank you. And thanks to you, too, for seconding the motion. I didn't expect that." Arthur smiled slightly. "I should have done it a long time ago. Rick was my friend, or at least I thought so, but in the last 2 years, he became someone I didn't recognize. Success went to his head. He started making impulsive decisions, spending money on vanity projects, treating people with contempt. What he did to you was just the confirmation of what I already knew." "And the other partners? How did they react after I left?" "There was a lot of discussion. Morris was furious, of course. He and Rick were always very close, but Frank and the others are more worried about the stability of the company. They want to ensure this transition doesn't affect our current contracts or our reputation in the market." "And what do you want?" Arthur looked me straight in the eye. "I want to save this company. Mercury Logistics has enormous potential, but we've been wasting it with Rick's mismanagement. There are projects we should have pursued and didn't. There are clients we lost because of his arrogance. There are talented employees who quit because they couldn't stand the toxic environment. If you give me the chance, I think I can fix all that. Then do it. You have my full support." "Thank you. But I need you to understand something, Valerie. Being the majority shareholder doesn't just mean having power. It also means having responsibility. There are decisions only you can make. There are meetings you'll have to attend. And you need to learn about this company, about our services, our clients, our competitors. I know, and I want to learn." "Where do I start?" Arthur smiled, clearly pleased. "Right here." He pushed a thick folder toward me. "This is an executive summary of everything Mercury Logistics does. Our core services, our biggest clients, our financial statements for the last 3 years, and an analysis of our market position. Read it tonight. Tomorrow we can meet again and discuss any questions you have." I took the folder. It was heavy, full of documents. "And later," he continued, "I'm going to give you a full tour of the company. You're going to meet the department heads. You're going to see our operations in action. You're going to understand how the work flows day to day. And in a few weeks, when you feel comfortable, you're going to start attending important meetings with me." "And what about Victoria?" Arthur sighed. "She resigned yesterday afternoon. She sent a very dramatic email saying she couldn't work at a company that betrayed Rick like that. Honestly, it's better this way. Her relationship with Rick was an open secret and was creating problems of favoritism in the finance department. Who is going to fill her place? I have someone in mind. Sandra Diaz, the Deputy Director of Finance. She's brilliant, has experience, and is completely professional. I was going to propose it to her formally today. Do it. And if there are other positions that need to be filled or reorganized, you have my authorization to do so." We spent the next 2 hours discussing the operational details of the company. Arthur explained the most important contracts, the projects in development, the challenges we faced. It was a lot of information, overwhelming but also fascinating. For the first time in years, I felt my brain was actually working, processing complex information, making connections. When I finally left the office, It was 1 p.m., and I was hungry. I decided to eat in the building's cafeteria, something I had never done when I was married to Rick. We had always gone to expensive restaurants when I visited him at the office. The cafeteria was full of employees on their lunch break. When I entered, several conversations stopped abruptly. People looked at me, some with curiosity, others with suspicion. I served myself a salad and an orange juice, paid, and looked for an empty table. "Miss Sterling?" a female voice called out. I turned and saw a young woman, perhaps 25, with short hair and large glasses. "Sorry to bother you, but could I speak with you a moment?" "Of course," I said, indicating she should sit. She sat across from me, visibly nervous. "My name is Laura Miller. I work in the operations department. I wanted to thank you for what you did." "Thank me?" "Yes. Mr. Montgomery was difficult to work for. Especially for women. There was a lot of harassment, a lot of discomfort, and he protected certain employees who did the same. Many of us wanted to quit, but we needed the job. When we found out you had removed him, it was like breathing fresh air for the first time in years." I was speechless for a moment. I hadn't thought about that. I hadn't considered that my action would have an impact on employees beyond the executive suite. "Was it that bad?" I asked. Laura nodded. "It was worse than you imagine. And Miss Owens wasn't any better. In fact, in some ways she was worse because she used her position to take revenge on women she considered a threat. Why did no one report this? Some tried. But Mr. Montgomery was untouchable, or so we thought. He was the CEO, the founder. Who was going to listen to us? I felt a mixture of rage and sadness. All this time, while I was at home being the perfect wife, Rick was creating a horrible work environment for dozens of employees, and I had no idea. "That is going to change," I promised Laura. "Arthur Mendelsohn is in charge now, and he isn't going to tolerate that kind of behavior. And if there are more cases that need to be reviewed, I want you to report them directly to Human Resources. We are going to investigate every complaint seriously." Laura smiled, and I saw tears in her eyes. "Thank you, Miss Sterling. Really, thank you very much." After Laura left, I remained seated in the cafeteria eating my salad mechanically while my mind processed all this new information. I had come here thinking this was just about my personal revenge against Rick, but now I realized it was much bigger than that. There were employees depending on me doing things right. There was a corporate culture that needed to be changed. There were lives that could improve if I made the right decisions. It was a huge responsibility. And for the first time in 9 years, I felt I had a real purpose. That afternoon, I returned to the Brooklyn house and dedicated myself to reading the folder Arthur had given me. The documents were dense, full of technical jargon and numbers, but I forced myself to read them carefully, taking notes, looking up terms I didn't understand on the internet. By the time I finished, it was 11 p.m. and my head hurt, but I understood much better what the company did and what its position in the market was. Over the next few days, I followed a similar pattern. Every morning, I went to the office and met with Arthur. He introduced me to different department heads, explained their functions, showed me reports and analyses. In the afternoons, I locked myself in the Brooklyn house and studied everything I had learned that day. On the 4th day, Arthur invited me to attend a meeting with one of our most important clients, a supermarket chain that needed to renew its distribution contract with us. I was going to be there only as an observer, but I was still nervous. The meeting was in a conference room at the client's offices. The purchasing director was a man in his 50s, slightly overweight, with a suit that was a bit too tight. His name was Richard Fountain, and when Arthur introduced me, he looked at me with barely disguised skepticism. "Miss Sterling," he said, shaking my hand with less enthusiasm than he had shown Arthur. "I've heard rumors about changes at Mercury Logistics, changes that concern me." "What kind of changes concern you, Mr. Fountain?" I asked, trying to sound professional. "Well, Mr. Montgomery and I had a very good working relationship. He understood our needs. He was flexible with terms. Now that he's gone, I don't know if we can count on the same level of service." Arthur was about to respond, but I raised my hand gently. "Mr. Fountain, I understand your concern, but let me assure you that Mercury Logistics' commitment to its clients has not changed. In fact, I believe it is going to improve. Arthur Mendelsohn has been with the company since the beginning and knows the operations better than anyone, and I, as the new majority shareholder, am committed to ensuring we maintain the highest standards of service. Richard looked at me with a mixture of surprise and cautious respect. You are the majority shareholder? I thought you were just Rick's ex-wife. I am that too, I completed. But I have my own merits. I studied economics at Columbia. I worked in corporate banking before my marriage. And now I am dedicating all my time and energy to learning about this company and ensuring its success. Richard nodded slowly. Impressive. Very well. Then let's talk numbers. The meeting lasted 2 hours. Arthur handled most of the negotiation, but I intervened at several moments with questions and observations demonstrating I had done my homework. By the time we finished, we had not only renewed the contract but expanded it to include 3 new product lines. When we left the meeting, Arthur smiled at me. You did very well in there. Really? I felt like an imposter. We all feel like that at first. But you held your own, and more importantly, you showed your will. That night, while I was driving back home, my phone rang. It was an unknown number, but I decided to answer. Valerie? It was Rick's voice. He sounded different, less sure, almost vulnerable. What do you want, Rick? I need to talk to you. Can we meet? We have nothing to talk about. Please, just give me 10 minutes. I promise I won't cause trouble. I just need to talk to you. I hesitated. Every instinct told me to hang up, not to give him another minute of my time. But there was something in his voice that made me pause. All right, 10 minutes. Tomorrow at 8 p.m. at the coffee shop on the corner of the company building. I'll be there. Thank you, Valerie. I hung up and stared at the phone, wondering if I had just made a mistake. The coffee shop was almost empty when I arrived at 8 p.m. sharp the next night. It was a small, cozy place with wooden tables and minimalist decor. Rick was already there, sitting at a table in the back with a cup of coffee in front of him that he didn't seem to have touched. When he saw me enter, he stood up automatically, a gesture of courtesy that surprised me. I sat across from him without saying anything, waiting for him to speak. He looked different than I remembered. He had deep circles under his eyes, his hair was a bit messy, and his clothes, while still expensive, were wrinkled. He wasn't the impeccable Rick I knew. Thank you for coming, he said finally, his voice hoarse. I wasn't sure you would. You said you needed to talk. Here I am. You have 10 minutes. Rick took a deep breath, as if preparing for something difficult. I want to apologize. The words caught me completely by surprise. In 9 years of marriage, I couldn't remember a single time Rick had sincerely apologized to me for anything. Apologize? For what exactly? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. For everything. For how I treated you during our marriage. For taking you for granted. For not valuing everything you did for me. And especially for how I ended things. What I did that Monday was unforgivable. Calling you to my office, humiliating you in front of everyone, having Victoria there. It was cruel and stupid. Yes, it was, I agreed. Why did you do it? Why that way? Rick looked down at his coffee cup, avoiding my eyes. Because I'm a coward. Because I was afraid to face you alone. I knew if it was just you and me, I'd have to see the pain in your eyes. I'd have to face what I was really doing. I thought if there were witnesses, if I turned it all into a spectacle, it would be easier. I could act like the strong, decisive man everyone expected me to be. And Victoria? What role does she play in all this? Rick grimaced. Victoria was a mistake, a monumental mistake. I thought I was in love with her. I thought she understood me in a way you didn't. But the truth is, I just liked how she made me feel young, successful, desired. It was my ego talking, not my heart. Where is she now? Gone. After resigning from Mercury Logistics, she left me too. Turns out what attracted her wasn't me, it was my position, my power. When I lost all that, I wasn't interesting to her anymore. There was a part of me that felt a dark satisfaction hearing that. But another part, a larger part, just felt sadness. Sadness for the wasted years, for the marriage that could have been, for the man Rick could have been. And now what, Rick? Are you here to ask me to give you back your job? To annul the divorce? No, he said quickly, finally looking me in the eye. I don't expect that. I don't deserve that. I just wanted you to know I'm sorry. That I realize what I lost. Not just the company, although that hurts, but you. I lost an incredible woman who supported me unconditionally for years, and I traded her for an illusion. I felt a lump in my throat, but I wasn't going to get carried away by emotions. Rick, I appreciate the apology, truly, but it doesn't change anything. You did what you did, and the consequences are what they are. I know. And I'm not here to ask you to change anything. I just wanted you to know I was wrong about you, about me, about everything. He paused. And I also wanted to tell you I admire what you're doing with the company. I've heard things that you're learning, that you're attending meetings, that the employees respect you. You were always more capable than I gave you credit for. You should have believed in me years ago, I said. Maybe things would have been different. You're right. But I was too arrogant, too convinced of my own importance. I believed only I could do things right, that everyone else was inferior, including you. And now I'm paying the price. We sat in silence for a moment. The waiter approached to ask if I wanted to order anything, but I shook my head. I wasn't going to stay longer than necessary. What are you going to do now? I asked him finally. Rick shrugged. I have some job offers. Nothing as prestigious as Mercury Logistics, but they're decent opportunities, and I'm considering starting therapy. Clearly, I have issues I need to resolve. I'm glad to hear that. We could all benefit from therapy. I started last week, I admitted. With everything that's happened, I needed to talk to someone neutral. Someone who could help me process all this. Rick nodded. You're wiser than me, as always. He stood up, and I did the same. Thank you for listening, Valerie. I know you had no obligation to do so. I didn't, I agreed. But I'm glad I did. I needed this closure. He extended his hand toward me, and after hesitating a moment, I shook it. I no longer felt rage toward him, only a sort of resigned sadness for what could have been and never was. I wish you the best, Rick, truly. And I think you're going to do incredible things. I walked out of the coffee shop feeling strangely light. It was as if a weight I didn't know I was carrying had finally lifted. Rick had been such a big part of my life for so long, and now that chapter was truly closed. During the following weeks, I immersed myself completely in work. Arthur was a patient teacher, teaching me the details of operations, introducing me to key clients, explaining the complexities of logistics and the supply chain. I also got to know the employees better, from drivers to warehouse supervisors, from accountants to the sales team. And while I learned about the company, I also started implementing changes. We established a zero-tolerance policy for harassment of any kind. We created a mentorship program for young employees. We raised the wages of entry-level workers who had been earning barely the minimum. They weren't revolutionary changes, but they were important. I also spent more time with Emmett. We met for dinner once a week, and little by little he told me the history of my family, about my grandparents, proud and traditional people who never accepted my father because they considered him beneath their social level. About my mother, who had been rebellious and passionate, who had chosen love over money and never regretted it. About how Emmett had tried to maintain contact, but my mother had been firm in her decision to build an independent life. I always admired her strength, he told me one night while we dined at an elegant restaurant on the Upper East Side. Patricia could have had an easy life, full of luxuries and comforts. But she chose the hard path because it was the true one, because it was with the man she loved. And I never saw her happier than when she was with your father and you. I wish I had known them better, I said. They died when I was just starting my adult life. I feel there is so much I don't know about them. I can tell you stories, Emmett offered. I have photographs, letters, everything I kept for years waiting for the moment to share it with you. I would like that. Emmett smiled. And also, if you're interested, I would like you to meet the rest of the family. Your grandparents passed away years ago, but you have cousins, uncles, people who would be delighted to meet you. Would they really want to meet me? I thought the whole family had rejected my mother. It was our parents who rejected her, and that mentality died with them. The younger generation is different, more open, more progressive, and everyone has heard stories about the brave Patricia who defied the family for love. You're something of a legend. The idea was intimidating, but also exciting. All my life, I had thought I was alone in the world, that I had no family beyond the memories of my parents. But it turned out there was a whole network of people connected to me by blood and history. 2 months after removing Rick, we called a general meeting of the entire company. It was something Rick had never done, according to Arthur. He preferred to keep things compartmentalized, with each department operating relatively isolated. But I wanted everyone to know what direction we were going, to feel they were part of something bigger. The meeting was in the building's auditorium, a large space normally used for conferences and events. When I entered, I saw it was full. There were at least 200 people, employees of all levels and departments. Some looked at me with curiosity, others with expectation, some with skepticism. I went up on stage with Arthur by my side. I had prepared a speech, written and rewritten several times, practiced in front of the mirror. But when I stood in front of that microphone, looking at all those faces, I decided to keep it in my pocket and speak from the heart. "Good morning, everyone," I began, and my voice sounded stronger than I expected through the sound system. I know the last few months have been full of change and probably uncertainty for many of you. When I assumed control of this company, it was under dramatic circumstances that probably everyone knows. I saw some smiles in the audience, some nods. I am not going to pretend I am an expert in logistics. I am not. Many of you know much more than I do about this business. But what I do have is commitment. Commitment to building a company that we can all be proud of. A company that is not only financially successful but also treats its people with respect and dignity. The words flowed now, sincere and direct. During the last few weeks, I have been learning about what we do here, and I have realized we have something special. We have dedicated employees, we have loyal clients, we have a solid business model, but I have also learned that we have had problems. Problems of workplace culture, problems of communication, problems of priorities. I saw Laura, the young woman who had approached me in the cafeteria, sitting in one of the front rows. She was looking at me with tears in her eyes. "So, here is my promise to you. I am going to work every day to make Mercury Logistics not just a good company, but a great company. A company where everyone's ideas are valued, where there are opportunities for growth for those who work hard, where no one has to endure harassment or mistreatment. And I am going to do it with the help of Arthur Mendelsohn, who is officially our new permanent CEO as of today." There was applause in the audience. Arthur blushed slightly but smiled. "I also want you to know that my door is open. Literally. I am going to be here every day working, learning, listening. If you have ideas, if you have concerns, if you have suggestions, I want to hear them, because this is not my company. It is our company. We are all part of this." The applause was louder this time. I saw several employees exchange looks of approval. "So thank you for your patience during this transition. Thank you for your dedication. And thank you for giving me the chance to prove I can do this. I won't let you down." When I stepped down from the stage, several employees approached to shake my hand, to thank me, to offer me their support. It was overwhelming, but also incredibly rewarding. That night, Sophie organized a celebration dinner at her apartment. She invited some close friends, including Mr. Fields and, of course, Emmett. It was a night of laughter, wine, good food, and better company. "A toast," Sophie said, raising her glass. "For Valerie, who in 2 months went from being the humiliated wife to being her ex-husband's boss. For well-executed revenge and poetic justice." "It wasn't revenge," I protested, though I was smiling. "It was justice." "Whatever you want to call it," Sophie laughed. "The point is you did it. I'm proud of you." Everyone toasted, and I felt my eyes fill with tears. Tears of happiness, of relief, of gratitude. "Thank you, everyone," I said. "Especially you, Uncle. Without you, none of this would have been possible." Emmett shook his head. "I only gave you the tools, Valerie. You are the one who decided to use them. You are the one who had the courage to stand up to Rick and claim your power. You are the one who is working day and night to learn and grow. All the credit is yours. Still, thank you." The following months passed in a blur of activity. The company thrived under Arthur's leadership. We won 3 major new contracts. We expanded our operations to 2 more cities, and our employee satisfaction increased significantly according to internal surveys. I kept learning every day. I took online courses on business management and logistics. I attended industry conferences, networked with other business people, and slowly but surely began to feel competent not just as the owner of the company, but as a true business leader. I also began to reconnect with the Sterling family. Emmett organized a lunch where I met my cousins, my distant uncles, this whole network of people who shared my blood but had been strangers to me all my life. They were kind and welcoming, curious about my life and eager to share stories about my mother. A cousin of mine, Diana, who was my age, became a close friend. She was a corporate lawyer, smart and funny, and we hit it off instantly. "It's incredible," she told me once while we were having coffee. "For years we heard the story of Aunt Patricia who defied the family. It was like a rebellious fairy tale. And now here you are, her daughter, living your own story of transformation." "I don't know if it's transformation or just survival," I joked. "It's both," Diana said seriously. "And it's inspiring. Many women would have stayed in that marriage, would have accepted the humiliation, would have thought they didn't deserve better. But you didn't. You fought." 6 months after that fateful Monday in the boardroom, I received a call from Mr. Fields. "Valerie, I have news. Rick is suing." My heart raced. "Suing? Why?" "He says the shares should have been considered marital property and therefore he has a right to half. He is arguing that the trust was established during the marriage and that, therefore, he has a right to a portion." I felt rage rising in my throat. "That's ridiculous. The trust was established 26 years ago, long before I even met Rick." "I know. And his argument is weak, but we still have to defend it. It's going to be a long and probably expensive process." "I don't care," I said with determination. "I will fight this to the end. I am not going to give him a single share." The legal battle lasted 4 months. It was 4 months of depositions, document review, meetings with lawyers. Rick argued that since he had been the director of the company during the marriage, he had contributed to the value of the shares and therefore deserved compensation. My lawyers argued that the trust was a family inheritance established long before the marriage, and that, therefore, it was protected from marital claims. They also pointed out that Rick had signed a prenuptial agreement at the start of our marriage, although I didn't remember it clearly at the time because of how overwhelming everything had been. The judge, after reviewing all the evidence, ruled in my favor. The shares would remain completely under my control. Rick would receive nothing beyond what had already been agreed upon in the original divorce.